morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your morning this holiday season to listen to our presentations today, especially Jeremy and Ken. I know you guys are very busy. So we are Team Greenlight, and our topic was the foot traffic and bicycle racks at the East Ben White Chick-fil-A location. A little introduction. The purpose of our research was to find a recommendation to give you two for your business concerning the issue at hand, the foot traffic and the bicycle racks. Our team is made up of 4 members, myself, Eli Fagerstrom. I will be covering the introduction of the presentation as well as the secondary data collection. The next presenter will be Kristen Rincones. She will be presenting the primary data collection. Then Joel Rodriguez is going to cover the findings and conclusions from our research. And finally, Steve Audu is going to cover the recommendations. So moving on to the introduction of our presentation, Team Greenlight presents to you two, Jeremy and Ken, the issue at hand, which is the foot traffic and lack of bicycle racks at the Chick-fil-A. So we need to first look at the primary data collection. So Kristen is now going to present that to us.
Thank you, Eli. Beautiful introduction. Like you said, my name is Kristen, and I'll be presenting the primary data collection. So in constructing our survey, we had a focus on students only. And so the student population, there's about 5,000 total, with about 4,100 being undergrads. And so we received about 279 valid surveys from this population, and we achieved over a confidence level of 95%. And like I said, we constructed our surveys focusing on students. So when we distributed them in our attended classes, dorms, dining halls, anywhere we could find other students. And so developing our survey, it consisted of about 8 survey questions and 2 demographics. There was multiple choice, true, false, ranked based, and the 2 demographic was how many people owned or used bicycles for transportation, and then classification, just to make it easier on dividing up the whole survey. And so our demographics consisted of 45 freshmen, 97 sophomores, 78 juniors, and 59 seniors. And here are a couple examples of our survey questions, like how close do you live to campus? Do you feel safe using a bike rack? Another one was how many times have you visited Chick-fil-A in the past 6 months? So we figured that out for you guys. And so I say that's 279 valid surveys because we originally distributed about 300. And so we had to figure out what was valid and what wasn't, what we had to throw out and what we could use. So like I said, we distributed about 300 and we got 289 back. And then we realized some people didn't answer the questions correctly, or they weren't fully filled out surveys. So valid surveys meant invalid surveys meant 3 or more questions were unanswered. So we completely omitted those surveys. And so invalid answers meant less than 3. So if there were 2 unanswered questions or one was answered incorrectly, we just omitted that question from calculating our tallies, and we just said it was not applicable. And so that gave us a more accurate depiction of the whole survey and the data collection. And so now I'm going to pass it back to Eli. Like he said, he's going to be presenting our secondary data collection.
Thank you. So for researching through secondary data sources, we first need to find a scope. Our scope was who rides bikes in Austin and how could we increase bicycle riding in different cities, using different cities as example. The city that we used for our secondary data in this case was Portland, Oregon, because there's a high population of cyclists. in Portland. Our sources were government sites, the U.S. Census Bureau, as well as advisory boards. The first piece of secondary data that we received was from an advisory board. It's from the U.S. Census Bureau. Between 2007 and 2011, they calculated the percentage of residents by neighborhood who rode bicycles to work. And right here is I-35, here's the river. So this red area right here is where St. Edwards is where the Chick-fil-A location is, and it's in red. So there's 10% of people between 2007 and 2011 that live in that neighborhood that ride bikes to work. We found this a very compelling piece of evidence to use as secondary data. The next piece of secondary data comes from the walkscore.com website. Walkscore is a site that calculates the necessity for an automobile in a city. Austin is ranked 34th in the country for least dependence on the automobile. It has a walk score, a transit score, and a bike score. Those each depict the ease of running errands and that sort of thing, not relying on a vehicle. So Austin's ranked among other cities for the reliance on personal automobile. We'll get into the findings and conclusions next, but these are just the sources that we found to get those findings. So I'll pass it off to Joe for the findings that we got from both our sources.
Thank you, Eli. Again, I would like to remind you guys that our primary findings are all based on only valid surveys. All invalid surveys were not used. So with that being said, this is what we concluded. From our primary findings, we found that 73% of students surveyed were not using a bicycle as their primary means of transportation. But 53% of students that we surveyed actually said they felt a lot safer using a bicycle rack. Our team also concluded that in the past 6 months, 77% of the students surveyed have visited the Chick-fil-A location on East Van White. Also, 31% of students surveyed said they would likely use a bike walk trail if one was available. And 24% of students actually said they would be very likely to use a bike walk trail. From our primary findings, most students would not be more willing to ride the bike to Chick-fil-A if there was bike racks implemented. 40% actually said they'd be very unlikely to ride a bike to Chick-fil-A if there was bike racks. And 30% said they would be unlikely to ride a bike to Chick-fil-A if you all implemented bike racks. To conclude our findings, we found that 36% of students that were surveyed were more willing to visit Chick-fil-A than any other restaurant around it, being Wendy's, P-Terry's, Subway, or Cocoa Bob's. From our secondary findings, as Eli mentioned earlier, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, more than 10% of the people that live around the East Van White Chick-fil-A location actually bike to work. Also, in accordance with the U.S. Walk Score, as Eli also mentioned, Austin is ranked 34 as the most walkable city in the nation. Finally, according to the AustinTexas.gov, people need to feel safer in order to cycle. And now I would like to pass it on to Steve to discuss the recommendations we have come up with for you.
Thank you, Joe. Again, I'm Steve Audu, and I'll be presenting the recommendations that will benefit Chick-fil-A. First, after conducting primary and secondary research, Team Greenlight recommends that you do not install bike racks at Chick-fil-A because it will not increase your sales. We also consider that you do further research on a direct path from St. Edwards to Chick-fil-A because some students have interest in that idea. We also recommend that you share some of our data and analysis with fellow Chick-fil-A in Austin or other Chick-fil-A restaurants that are in cities with that are friendly buyers. Thank you.
So to wrap everything up, let's do a quick summary of the resources that we got for our data collection. First, Kristen covered the primary data collection, talked about the survey. We wanted to achieve a certain confidence level, so we distributed about 300. We got about 279 back that were valid that we could use. Next, I covered the secondary data collection, talking about the U.S. Census Bureau, the government websites, and the advisory boards that we use for our secondary sources. Then Joel covered the findings that we got from these sources, from all the statistics about percentages of people visiting Chick-fil-A, feeling safe using bike racks, etc. And then Steve recommended that you guys don't implement the bike racks at your location specifically, but to recommend other Chick-fil-A's that maybe are in the right neighborhoods to use bicycles, that you could share those recommendations that we gave today. So thank you all for your attention, and we will open the floor for any questions.